And obviously that would probably call for regulatory coordination, otherwise there could be a race to the bottom. I mean, I can have very strong regulation in country A, but funds will go to country B and do all the operations there because the regulations there are more lax. Well, these are problems, moral hazard, but I would say that special attention should be paid to fixed income transactions, because that is one key spot where the system breaks. Because a fixed income transaction may give rise to this mismatch, and when it doesn't quite fit and work, these are very rigid contracts which result in bankruptcy if they are not viable, and so therefore and create all of these contagion and spreading problems. And in that sense, the IMF and the BIS, I think, are ideally positioned. The emerging markets can do something. With this I finish. We learned that de-dollarization, it seems to have helped in Latin America. Exhibiting sustainable current accounts also. But that's a lesson that you really don't want to have to learn, because obviously Latin America has been doing very well because the current account was positive this time around. But that means Latin America was lending to the rest of the world. It should be the other way around. So if that's the solution, it means that the imbalances will be with us for the rest of the time. And then maybe we should change the model of development completely. If we are going to be lending to the U.S., then we should be thinking about migration. Migration should be the key to development. People moving from developing to developed countries, that should be the emphasis, not accumulation of capital. Maybe that is the solution in the future if we cannot find a better financial system that sustains negative current accounts. And again, holding sizable international reserves seem to have worked. But again, the bad news is that it fosters the imbalances. Well, let me just say a few words to round this up. I guess the main challenge I find, and I think it's important to insist on that, is that to understand why small events, small and limited in principle crisis can spread so badly around the world. These are the episodes that we are living through now. We need to understand that. If we don't, then we start talking about things that are relevant but may not be central. Instead of talking about corruption, people getting big bonuses, stuff like that, maybe they are relevant, but we can fix all of that. And if we still have this vulnerability, fragility of the financial sector, this crisis may happen again, with saints now at the head of J.P. Morgan and company. The other point is that the credit channel is very key to the transmission to the real sector. Here's a point I didn't raise in my presentation, which is, if the credit market is important, who is responsible for the credit market? Is the central bank responsible? Do we want to make the central bank responsible for the credit market? That's a big change to what we have now, because so far central banks just focus on inflation mostly. But who's in charge of the credit market? Because that's where the transmission is. National banks, developing banks, are they key? I think there's a lot to learn about this. Development banks were used actively in Brazil and Chile. But in Chile, they could not prevent the collapse. Does it mean that they don't work? What would have happened if Chile did not use the development or official national banks? to increase credit and so on. So that is pending. Yeah, that's a point for which I think we need a lot of research, because the drawback, as we all know, of having the government take control of credit is that you politicize that, and you may end up with the worst of all worlds. You don't have a crisis, but you live in crisis. You don't realize, but you live in crisis. In any case, those are the points I wanted to share with you, and thank you very much for your attention.
Before we take some questions from the floor, I want to say that we are very grateful with also the collaboration with our academic partner, Sergi EI here in Prague. An applause for them. Thank you, Randy, very much. So this was a very exciting I would say lecture. Please, I open the floor we have just only 15 minutes for questions. Is there any question from the floor? Guillermo?
Just one question on one of the second best solution for emerging markets. Obviously, I think you're totally right that the first best solution is some sort of global coordination and some sort of a global lender of last resort. But not having that, having at least neutral current accounts and holding significant amount of reserves has proven to be a second best solution for developing countries that have not, those that did that have not had such harsh effect of the crisis. And some of them were able to grow at very fast rates, accumulating reserves and having current account surpluses. Because in a way, you were implying that that second best solution is very imperfect because you're not having credit or capital flowing to the developing countries and they could not grow enough, but they have been growing fast enough. So what would you say about that? Do you think it's viable that some countries like China and India and many others keep growing at very fast rates, accumulating with current account surpluses for a long time and accumulating reserves?
You want question by question? Yes.
I'm Chalong Pok from Thailand. It's very stimulating presentation. I have a very simple question to ask on the lender of last resort. In theory, that's fine. In practice, the key question is how much hit should the original owners of the financial institution take before they get the lending of last resort? In the case of, say, Thailand financial crisis, for example, when the IMF came in, they said that the government should not bail out the banks. So the original owner has to take the hit. So you write down the share prices to almost zero, and then, okay, you recapitalize. In the US case, basically in the layman case, okay, they did not lend the money. But in the other banks, you put in a lot of money, and then in the end, the original owners made billions. So the question is really, who is going to take the hit in order to benefit from the lending?
Yes.
Hi. Guillermo, the takeaway I get from your presentation, which is different, is the emphasis on the lender of last resort in the face of a bank run and a global bank run. But I want to focus a little bit on not the problem of too little credit after the crisis, but too much credit before the crisis. In particular, there was certainly a regulatory failure, which has been pointed out by many, and there was also a macro failure, which has been pointed out by people like Claudio Borri, Bill White, and others.